live long and prosper. So in this video series, I'm going to be talking through the social justice elements of every episode of the original series of Star Trek. The thing that inspired this project was actually a Fox News article which argued that Star Trek has in some way betrayed its traditional commitment to sort of political neutrality or middle ground by embracing progressive politics. In this series, we're going to see that Star Trek has always embraced progressive politics, and it's always been aspirational for social justice in various senses. I am taking a broad perspective on social justice here, so that may include multiple different types of social justice, whether that's racial, whether that's economic, whether that's religious, whether that's abilities, gender and sexuality, anything broadly considered. I will go through every episode. Some of the episodes I will interview fellow Trekkies and talk with them about it. And then below, in the descriptions, I will give you additional information about the episodes, particularly their original air date, who wrote the screenplay, and who directed that episode. I also want to dedicate this series to my dad, Michael Allen Zapkin. He was an OG Trekkie from back in the day, and it was watching the original series with him that I came to love Star Trek. In this video, we're going to talk about Elaan of Troyius. This is an episode in which the Enterprise is on a diplomatic mission. They have to transport Elaan, who is the dolmen of Elas, to a planet in their planetary system called Troyius. Elaan is to marry the king of Troyius in an attempt to end the war between the two planets. The Enterprise has to transport Elaan and Ambassador Petri, who's the ambassador of Troyius, while they are doing this diplomatic transportation. Petri has to teach Elaan the customs and manners of Troyius. Elaan is basically kind of a barbarian type civilization, it seems. The dolmen has absolute power. There are really no checks on her authority. She commands, and she expects that her commands will be obeyed without question. She does not have the kind of basic manners that most people... So the Troyans seem to be much more aligned with, like, Western culture, Western manners, American, European, etc., things like table manners, drinking out of a cup or a glass, eating off of a plate with silverware rather than ripping pieces of meat off and just, like, biting a hunk off it and throwing the bones on the floor. Also, Troyans don't tend to go around stabbing people who have moderately offended them, which Elaan does. She actually stabs Petri at one point, at which point he's basically like, yeah, nope, fuck this. I'm not teaching her. She can... I don't care. Let's let the war go on. I don't even care. I'm not dealing with this anymore. So Kirk takes over, trying to train Elaan to basically be able to function on Troyius. She is not thrilled with this arrangement. She does actually throw a knife at him at one point, but she misses. But she turns the situation to her advantage, because one of the things that we have already learned earlier in the episode, by the point that she turns this to her advantage, is that the women of Elos, the Elasian women, have a biochemical compound in their tears, and if their tears touch a man's skin, they gain a sort of hypnotic control over him. It's basically, McCoy describes it as a kind of super love potion. Kirk, however, missed that information when that was being relayed by Petrie. So Kirk doesn't know that. So Elaan cries, and Kirk wipes her tears. Oh, so gentle. But now he's biochemically addicted to her, basically. Like, he is now in love with her, which really kind of complicates the whole, we have a diplomatic mission to get you to Troyius so you can marry this king to stop a war shtick. While that is going on, one of Elaan's guards, Triton, sneaks into engineering and basically rigs the warp drive to explode as soon as they turn it on. The reason he has done this, apparently, is because he is in love with Elaan, and he has made a deal with the Klingons to basically turn over control of this entire planetary system to them, I guess, in exchange for maybe somehow him getting Elaan. So basically the plan is either they're going to blow up the Enterprise, which I don't really know how that was supposed to work out for Crichton, because it seems like, everybody would die, including him and Elaan. Or the Enterprise would surrender to the Klingons, at which point, presumably, Crichton, according to his deal, would get Elaan. One of the things that Crichton has done in sabotaging the Enterprise is he's basically destroyed the dilithium crystals. And if you know original series Star Trek, you know that dilithium crystals are what it's all about. The whole thing collapses without dilithium crystals. You gotta have those sweet, sweet dilithium crystals. So, the Enterprise is in a bit of a pickle because they can't fire their weapons, they can maneuver on impulse power, they can run their shields on impulse power, but they can't fight back, and they can't sustain running their shields on impulse power for very long. They can't maneuver very quickly. So, as soon as the Klingons decide, well, that's it, we're just going to blow this ship out of the sky, there isn't that much the Enterprise can do to stop them. But Kirk has, for some largely inexplicable reason, managed to actually reach Elaan and start convincing her to maybe, be a little bit considerate of others and whatnot. So, when Petrie goes back to Elaan and is like, now that we're all going to die in this Klingon attack, I'll ask you one more time, will you please accept these jewels, the most important port jewels or whatever it is, from Troyius, and wear them as a symbol of the hope for peace. She agrees to do this. Then she goes back up to the bridge of the Enterprise, where Kirk had explicitly just told her not to go. But it turns out it's actually good that she went up to the bridge of the Enterprise, because Spock gets the little medical scanner salt shaker guy, and he's like, there's dilithium crystals around here. Aha, this necklace you're wearing, full of dilithium crystals. And she's like, oh, yeah, they're totally common stones. Go ahead, have them. So, Spock and Scotty go down to engineering. They put the crystals in. The Enterprise manages to fend off the Klingons. Elaan goes off to Troyius. And Kirk is apparently cured of the biochemical thing by his love of the Enterprise. So, there's a lot of stuff here that's social justice interesting, we'll say. So first off, Elaan, played by Franz Nguyen is a woman of color. So I'm not that bothered necessarily about the fact that this is an arranged marriage. She is, after all, basically a member of the royal family, and in royal families, that's very, very common. Arranged marriages are very, very traditional. Whether or not that's a good thing is a different question, but I'm not inherently bothered by that as a social justice element, because again, both Elysian and Troyan societies seem to be somewhat feudal in nature. What's more problematic, I think, is the way that Elaan is presented as this basically spoiled brat, is, I think, the best way of putting it. The fact that she's very demanding, that she has no consideration of others, that she's just outright rude continually, that she demands that all of her whims be catered to, etc., etc. This is, for a female character, this is remarkably questionable. Because, I mean, this is a big anti-feminist trope, right? That women are fickle and demanding, and that they operate on whims and emotions, and they're not rational, etc., etc. So the fact that the Troyan ambassador Petri is male and presents, generally speaking, what seems like a fairly reasonable case for, we have to stop this war, we have to teach her how to function on our planet, etc., etc. Though it is also worth noting, he does say, I don't care, when I am around Elysians, I want to kill them. So he is not entirely rational either, but he's much more rational and much more reasonable than Elaan in the early portion of the episode. There's also the fact that she's a woman of color. And she has this biochemical ability to bewitch men. This is problematic because this is another big, long-standing stereotype of women of color, whether that's women of African descent, African American, slaves, etc., etc. Post-Civil War, post-13th Amendment, still big part of cultural narratives. The Black Temptress. You get the same thing with East Asian and South Asian women. East Asian, especially, the idea of the submissive, the submissive Asian woman who would sort of cater to a man's desires. In South Asia and both the Indian subcontinent and the Middle East, you have the sort of exoticization of belly dancing and the harem, and these sort of Orientalist ideas of decadent lasciviousness in these cultures. And so casting a woman of color to play this character who is haughty and demanding and commands men's love against their will is really quite problematic in terms of depictions of women of color. So we've got that aspect of it. Another aspect of this is, and this kind of actually almost goes the opposite direction, we've got a kind of date rape drug type situation here, right? This idea that Elysian women have a biochemical ability in their tears to almost hypnotize men, to force men to love them. Basically, she roofies Kirk here. And of course, date rape drug, I think it's fairly clear. I shouldn't necessarily have to spell this out. Date rape drugs are an incredibly horrendous thing because you eliminate someone's free will, someone's ability to make choices for themselves, to determine what they want to do with their body, etc., etc. So it's not necessarily exactly the same kind of thing, because this is, again, more like a love potion, which isn't a real thing. But it does eliminate Kirk's ability to make decisions based on his own desires, his own feelings, his own experiences, in much the same way that date rape drugs prevent someone from making choices based on their own desires, their own feelings, their own experiences. And so, again, we've got this. So the reason I say that's kind of working in the opposite direction, which I think I had said, is normally we think of date rape drugs being used by men against women. Here it's being used by a woman against a man. But that's also actually takes us back to what I was saying before about the negative representations of women of color, because alongside the idea of being sexual temptresses or sexually lascivious or things like this, another big, long-standing stereotype of women of color associates them with witchcraft, the ability to do magic. And so love potions are a traditional form of magic, right? It's a very basic, very common thing that people would go to witches or go to cunning folk or whatever it was in that particular community in order to seek out. So the woman of color here, Elaan, is linked to sexual domination, sexual almost hypnotism. She's linked to witchcraft indirectly. All negative stereotypes of women of color.